So basting curved edges in UPP works a little differently than the straight-sided ones. I have glued this template to fabric like we did in the basics basting video. And I used a gingham here so it'd be real clear that I've cut this fabric out on its bias grain, because fabric on the bias has a little stretch, and that's really going to help this fabric stretch along this curved edge. Use your pattern to tell you how to baste any straight edges of your patch. We're going to focus on the curve. So I have folded the very corner of the fabric over and have taken a basting stitch there at the corner to really anchor that down. Then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to do a tiny little gathering stitch that sits right in the middle of this 3/8 inch margin of fabric around my patch, which is also known as the seam allowance. Just passing the needle in and out of the fabric, stitches maybe 1/16 of an inch wide. And what's cool is when I pull that thread snug, it's going to gather the fabric right along that curved edge and make it nice and smooth. Isn't that cool? I like to gather my curves in thirds, so let me just take this little tiny gathering stitch to a point where it's about 1/3 of the way along the entire edge. So I'll pull my needle through, and then I'm just going to fold the fabric over at only this point of the curve. And we're going to take a tiny little basting stitch here. I'll pull my thread to gather the fabric, and then I'm going to pass that needle through all layers of fabric and the paper template, so it goes through to the front side. And then I'll put the needle back up or back through the paper and the templates. And as you can see, I'm taking a really tiny little stitch here. The smaller the stitch, the better the job it'll do of anchoring those gathers around the curve. Look how nice that's starting to look. And you can see my tiny stitch showing on the right side. Pretty neat. So from here, what I'm going to do is continue this process. I'll run another tiny gathering stitch, again, another third of the way along the curve. And then when I get to that 2/3 point, I'll go ahead and fold the fabric over once again, and we'll take another tiny little anchoring basting stitch at this point. And as I pull the basting stitch through, the little anchor stitch is what's going to help keep that gathered edge in place. And so I'll just finish off the third of my edge here with a little bit more gathering stitch. The smaller you keep these gathers, the smoother the basted curve you're going to get. And then when I get to the very end, I'll fold the fabric over at the very corner, and then I'll take one last and slightly larger basting stitch to just really hold that fabric in place. And that is all there is to it. I have a beautiful half circle patch with a smooth curved edge. I'm ready to sew that, and you can see my little anchor stitches showing on the front. And that is how you baste an outward facing curve.